Good morning. So, guess what? I'm back. So, it's been on my heart. I had something incredible happen yesterday, and by worldly standards, some might say that that's a little crazy. When I get done with this story, to speak of it in terms of being something incredible and amazing. Um, but let me tell you a little story. So, in the last not even month, the Lord has been working on fear with me. Fear is something that I've struggled with, as a lot of people do, for years and years in my life. I don't know that as human beings we'll ever be completely free of fear on this side of heaven, but I've been studying under an incredible mentor. I'm calling him my mentor. He doesn't know this yet, but his name is Jamie Winship, and he is just incredible at teaching us how to discern our identity in the kingdom versus the false identity that the enemy wants us to believe over that. Because that's how the enemy keeps us ineffective or hinders our effectiveness for the kingdom. So anyways, I've been pouring into and learning a lot of what he teaches. He loves the Lord, and I see that God has given him an incredible ministry, and the ripple effect of what he teaches is literally calling forth into the natural revelation and revival among his people, the Lord's people. And I see this, I'm experiencing this, my friends are experiencing this, so it's really exciting. However, all of that said, a few weeks ago, and I would say the week prior to July 25th, I started asking the Lord every day, what do you have for me today, Lord? What do you want me to learn today? What do you want me to do today? And what do I need for today? And so I had been asking him that. My husband and I went on a trip to Chicago. He is a pharmacist, and there's a pharmacy convention they have every year. So we went to Chicago. Well, Ryan was in meetings all day for that, and I went along to be with him, in the evenings and the times that I could be with him, but also to explore Chicago. I'd never been there and spent time there. And it's always a place that I had wanted to go, and I had a big list of things to do. I had asked for some suggestions from some of you on Facebook, and was really, really excited about the adventures I was going to have during the day on my own. So each day, as I was waiting on the Uber, I'd say, okay, Lord, what do you have for me today? And on July 25th, I believe this was a Thursday, while I was in Chicago, I went to the Willis Tower. And the Willis Tower, the 103rd floor specifically of the Willis Tower, which used to be called the Sears Tower, it is like the highest place you can get in Chicago as just a patron, and you have incredible panoramic 360-degree views. They say you can see 4 states on a clear day. Don't ask me which ones, I can't tell you, but I want to say it's like 12 to 1300 feet up. The backstory on this is that I had developed this absolutely ridiculous fear of heights only when I became an adult, and specifically after I had become a mother. And it's so unusual, especially for me, because if you know me, I grew up with a mother that lived in Wichita and a father who lived in the Denver, Colorado area. And my summers would be spent in Colorado with my dad, most of them, and we would hike, camp, fish. We were in and on mountains, like from the time I was probably 6 years old all the way through my growing years, and I was never afraid of heights. That just didn't exist in me. But I think there was something about when my oldest son came into the world and I really experienced what it is to be living for somebody else. That's the only thing I can make it make sense is that this irrational fear of heights developed in me. And I had a ridiculously humiliating experience in the St. Louis Arch. This is when it really began to show itself, where my rational mind was like, we shouldn't be up here. This doesn't make sense, blah, 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 and had a full-blown panic attack. One of the most embarrassing moments of my entire life, even to this day. Anyways, so I had been, and over the years, my husband and I love going to the mountains. We hike and camp and fish and do all the things. But there are times when we're driving, like on an overpass, or there are times when we're up on a mountain where like it would not be crippling, but it would be there and just irrational to me. And it's just something that another component of that is like, if we would be traveling and we would be staying up in a higher floor, like even to go out on the balcony of the hotel room, I couldn't like bring myself to really look over, because I had this irrational fear that I might lose control of my faculties in my body and like throw myself off. And it's so bizarre. It's so bizarre. But what makes me feel better is I've met many people over the years in having these conversations that also have that same thing. I don't know what it's called, but it's weird. Anyways, so July 25th, the Lord guides me to the Willis Tower in Chicago and walks me through a process while I'm up there that empowers me to look out the windows. And he had me start by fixating my gaze out far, like to the horizon, and Chicago sits on a great lake, and so it almost looks like you're looking over the ocean. You can't see the end of it. So he caused me to think, okay, start your gaze out far, settle into that, and then come in closer, and then come into the shoreline, and then come into the buildings, and then look down. And so he kind of walked me through this process of taking it in steps, and to where I got to the point where I could literally have my head against the glass and look down at the street below and see the little micro ant cars and people, and just breathe through it and settle into it. And the Lord lifted my fear of heights that day, and it was amazing. And I am so grateful for that. One of the things that Jamie has taught me is that oftentimes, if you tell the Lord in honest conversation what you are most afraid of, He's going to take that thing right to you, or take you through or to that thing, and show you that, one, He is right there with you, and two, that you have nothing to be afraid of. So I see that the Lord really began working on this with me, this fear, in Chicago on July 25th. Interestingly enough, the following week on July 31st, you may have heard another video I made recently where I gave my testimony about what the Lord did with me through that, so I won't go back into those details. But the very following week, the Lord allowed me to be let go from my job that I had been in for almost 6 years. And one of my fears, because we love our home, what my husband and I have built here, we've been blessed. We've worked hard. The Lord has blessed that. We love our home and what it means for our family and our friends. And just, we lovingly call this place the Lighthouse, because we believe that God has things that He wants to do through this place. in our group of influence and then beyond. Anyways, so one of my fears has always been tied to financial. And so interestingly enough, the very next week, the Lord allows my job to be taken away. And it was completely unexpected. And it was so interesting because He gave me day one, the day it happened, I was, completely shocked. I was completely devastated at the realization, like, I have to let go of this baby that I've called it my baby. I had invested, all my time and energy into the mission of that work. So I had to let go of that. That was sad. It was abrupt. It was a shock. The way in which it was done was very humiliating. So my pride was like assaulted with that, which is fine. And within 24 hours, the Lord completely lifted me of the sadness and all those yucky feelings that had happened the day before. And from that point on, I have been so incredibly filled with peace and joy, and the fruit of the Spirit has been just magnified and amplified in me, and I'm so grateful. So, the fear of heights, the fear of losing a job, and the fear of financial devastation. And the funny thing is, the amazing thing is, because God is so good and sweet, the Lord instantly provided financially. He has already given me an increase in another job that I had, and something in my husband's work as well, to where not only did he bring us through very quickly an assault on our finances that was significant, but He gave us an increase already. It's like we haven't even felt any ramifications of it. And it's awesome. And He's awesome. So He's showing, I am Jehovah Jireh. The Lord will provide, the Lord who provides. So that fear, gone. And then yesterday, this brings me to where I began in the story. I got the call that I have melanoma skin cancer. And the backstory of that is that I'd say about 2 months ago, there's an airplane. We live in a flight path, so we'll give it a minute. But about 2 months ago, I had noticed a mole on my lower right, my upper right leg, my upper calf area on the inside of my leg, a mole that looked kind of funny. It was darker in one area, and I had never noticed it before. I don't know how long it's been there, but I remember seeing it and being like, I'll get to that eventually. And at that time, I was super inundated with work. It was like a chronic way of life, too much working, too much out of balance, did not take care of myself, have not kept up on important appointments that I really should have as a woman. But I remembered seeing it and then just being like, I'll get to it later. Well, the week after we came back from Chicago, my right foot started having this weird pain by one of my toes, like more in the foot bone area. But the first couple days I was like, gosh, this is annoying, and I don't know what I did. I haven't had an increase in any kind of I'm not working out. I didn't have an injury, couldn't figure out, where is this coming from, and just kind of walked a little different just to kind of compensate and not put pressure on that area. So I did that for about 2 days, 3 days, and it really started. Then my ankle started to pull, and then like day 4, my calf, like I had this major calf strain, and the pain in the foot, and it was point tender, and the swelling got greater, and it became really painful pretty quickly and just very perplexing. And so that Thursday night of that week, the symptoms started on Monday. That Thursday night, I'm sitting outside waiting for my husband to get home from work, and really just like researching about what this foot injury could be, and feeling it, and I'm looking at this mole, and I'm like, gosh, now I'm getting paranoid. Maybe I should really do something. Is that something? And now it's spread out on my foot. Your brain just kind of goes to all those places. Well, the I started doing research with Dr. Google, and it became suggestive to me that this could be melanoma. And so when my husband got home, I was talking to him and telling him about my foot and all this, and he's like, oh, let's take some pictures and send them to our friend. We have a friend who's a surgeon. And so Ryan sent pictures to him, and he said, yeah, that's suspicious. She needs to get in. So the next morning, which was a Friday morning, I started just calling dermatology offices. And the interesting thing is, the very first one that I called, I just explained the situation. I said, look, I'm not an established patient, because I know a lot of times it can take months to get into those places. And I said, we do have a friend that's a surgeon. He's saying we need to be seen sooner than later. Could you put me on a cancellation list, what have you? Well, they were able to schedule me out for a week from that day, which was the following Friday. Well, then I kept making phone calls to see if maybe I could get something sooner somewhere. And within the hour, they called me back and they said, hey, we got a cancellation for Tuesday, so we'll bump you up to Tuesday. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, then that same morning, I get a text from my husband and our friend, and he had consulted a dermatologist that he knew with those pictures, and he said, have her call my office. We need to get her in. And so I called his office number, and it was already the office I had the appointment on for Tuesday with. And so I called them and said, hey, Dr. So-and-so said to give you a call. Well, then they bumped me up to Monday. So, scary conversation to Thursday night. Friday morning, things are happening. Get an appointment for Monday. I go in that Monday, and I really want to talk about that Monday morning. So, I was not super freaked out about this, but when you start researching and you start reading about melanoma, and I've known and heard of some individuals in the community that didn't catch it quite as fast and those things, and fear just comes into that. And that is one of the fears that I have had, is cancer. And the Lord has been working, addressing fear with me and showing me he's right there with me through this. And he I did pretty fine over the weekend, just kind of didn't think about it and had been praying about it. But then Monday morning, Monday's the day I go in that afternoon to get the mole removed and wait for the lab and all that. And I went out for my time with the Lord in the morning, and I was really struggling with fear and was having a very raw and honest conversation with the Lord, because I understand the Lord's sovereignty, and I see and know, I'm going to believe for healing, but I know that sometimes it is not God's will to be delivered from something like cancer. And there are things in the natural that we don't understand. Why does some he cure and some he doesn't? I know from the sovereignty of the Lord that he allows catastrophe to happen, which is a horrific thing for some people in that. But I also know and see that he has, the hard thing creates a ripple effect that is beyond what we can even see or understand in the natural. And he uses those hard things and awful things to bring about his will and good in the lives of other people. And I've always thought, like, maybe part of why he allows that is because if it hadn't happened, the world would not see him as amplified as what they see through those experiences. If that makes sense. So, that morning of the removal, I, in my time with him, Holy Spirit caused me to think about Jesus when he went to the Garden of Gethsemane, after the Passover, the night before he was arrested and then crucified the following day. And, Jesus went to the garden to pray. And this morning I looked at the account in Matthew and in Mark and in Luke, and they all say essentially the same thing, of course, but the part in Matthew of Jesus going to the garden to pray that really stuck out to me is where, and this is what also the Lord had brought to my attention. Of course, I lost it just now. Jesus had gone to the garden to have quiet time with the Lord, and he said, Father, if it's your if it's your will, would you take this cup of suffering from me? Jesus was agonizing. Jesus knew what was about to happen, and he was fully human and fully God. And as fully human, he was feeling the agony, the anxiety, and all of the things, as you can imagine, that would come with the crucifixion. And so he prayed to the Lord and said, if it's your will, take this cup from me, but regardless, your will be done. And then he went and talked to the disciples again, and then he went back to quiet time with the Lord in the garden a second time, and he said, Lord, if it's not your will to take this cup from me, regardless, your will be done. He said it in a much more beautiful way, but that's the paraphrasing. And the Lord caused me to think of Jesus in the garden that morning that I was wrestling with fear so bad. And I thought about that, and I know in God's sovereignty that his will is best, whether it be this way that I would prefer or whether it be that way that only he understands and knows why. And so he really brought me to a place of peace, not without wrestling first with, your brain when you're in this situation and, like I'm about to go get a test done, and the evidence we see in the natural is not looking great, but we don't really know what that's going to look like until we get more information or we get a test back or a lab back or what have you. And so in the natural, I'm thinking about, and I'm believing, Lord, I know you're going to heal me of this. I know that whatever this is, you're taking care of it. I know we have so much work to do together, and he's given me a fresh vision for a project that I'm working on right now that I'll tell you about later. That is so awesome, and it came from him, and I'm super excited about it. So I'm like, okay, I believe you are going to do the business here and get this taken care of so we can keep running together toward this thing that he has called me to. However, I know you are sovereign, and I know that you are God, and I know that it may not go that way. So I'm trusting in you for regardless what that looks like. But the other part of that equation was, okay, Lord, if I do have cancer, and if it has spread to my foot, because I have this weird injury, I can't figure out why I have it. So, I'm in the medical field, and so I know a little too much. Dr. Google doesn't help. And so I'm thinking, okay, if it's spread to my leg and you have to take my leg, okay, take my leg. But I am going to wear one of those prosthetics, those silver ones that I've seen people running marathons in, and I am going to hike on mountains again, and I am not going to let that stop me. And I know you're going to help me do that if that's your will and that's how this goes. Like, I'm okay with that. And then the other piece of it for me was, if it is the worst scenario and it's beyond, and if you choose not to deliver me from this, I know you're going to use my experience in infinite ways to work things out for the good of people that will come from that, because only he knows and understands that, and he's God. So the thing that was hard for my heart on that was the thought of, my kids, without their mom, and not getting to see my grandchildren and imparting the things that he's given to me into those babies that I cannot wait to meet someday. And so, he just sweetly ministered to my heart about that, to help me with that, if that was going to be his will, that again, he would provide and he would show his mercy and his sweetness, and brought me to a place of back to trust and peace, and keeping my eyes focused on him, that regardless of the way it went, that he is good, he is trustworthy, and he is with me. And so Monday was the hardest. He was working on that in me and in my mind and in my heart and in my spirit. And then I go to the doctor, get it done. I didn't struggle with fear the rest of the week. And they had said, it's going to be 1 to 2 weeks before we get the results, and we'll go from there. We'll call you, all the things. And so there were a couple of tender moments where actually that involved, acquaintance or friends praying for me over this leg, where I did, have emotion, and, the fear just kind of pops back up, but not to the degree that I was struggling with it that Monday morning. So the Lord has been so good and sweet to me in that. And so he provided everything that I needed in the waiting. And then, and one of the coolest things that he did is that he connected me with a lady who lives right here in my neighborhood, who he is bringing us together to work on sharing some of the training that we've been tapping into with Jamie Winship in our homes, and starting a women's group. And it's so sweet and so neat. And that all came about from my testimony video that I shared a few weeks ago here on Facebook. It's so amazing how he works. And I actually got to meet her for the first time last Friday in person. And we were having coffee and we were talking about all the things. And then toward the end of our time together, she asked about my foot, because I'm wearing a walking brace because I believe I have a stress fracture in that toe. And then I shared with her about how I had that mole removed, and she says, you know what? She said, when I was in my early 20s, I think that was the age frame that she referenced, if I remember right, forgive me if not. She said, I had a spot in that same exact location, and it was melanoma, and it was removed, and everything was good, and it all worked out fine. And she reminded me that the medications and the treatments now are excellent for that and all of that. And it was such a sweetness because the Lord literally just orchestrated that relationship and that connection. And the fun thing about that is it was in the exact same spot as where mine is. So that's how he works. That's what he does. That's how he speaks to me. And it's so sweet. And it was encouragement. And it was just another way that he's saying, I'm right there with you, girl. And I love him. And anyway, so I get the call yesterday afternoon from the physician's nurse, and she said, Azure, she said, it is melanoma. And she said, but if you are going to get melanoma, this is the way that you want it. She said that it is melanoma in situ, and I think that's Latin for in tissue, if I remember my medical terminology right, meaning that it was caught very early, that it has just gone into the upper tissue layer. And so I am going to go back in for a surgery the first week of September. They take out a larger area, make sure that they got clear borders and have got all of it, send it off to the lab, make sure everything is looking like there aren't any cells that are still remaining. And then they'll just sew me up and it'll heal. And I just win the prize of going back every 6 months for the next 5 years. So anyways, I just wanted to share this testimony with you about what the Lord has been doing. He walks us through the hard things in life, and he is right there with us. And I'm hoping this is it as far as the fears. There's another one I don't want to speak to, but the Lord is walking me through this season of like, girl, we gotta look at this fear thing, because it's number one, it's not any more real than you give it the power to be real. And I'm going to be right there with you. And so I really felt like the Lord wanted me to share this with everyone to really get you to think about that, because I know in this economy and in this time, so many people are going through so many things, and there's a lot of fear in this culture right now, especially, and we need him more than ever. And so I hope that this encourages you with whatever you might be walking through or experiencing or be afraid of right now. Know that He is there with you. Know that He will provide everything that you need. You have a community and resources around you. If you need to talk to me, if you need prayer, if you need to meet, if you need anything in this regard, I would love to help to breathe word and truth and love into you around the things that I know of the Lord and what He has done with me to be an encouragement and help to you also. So thank you for joining me, and we'll talk soon.